Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the fourth and final debate put on by the Buffalo Bulletin.
Okay, thank you, Mark, and thank you for the sponsors' trouble of putting these things together. By way of introduction, I'm in my 8th year as a representative from this district, and I used to be a college professor. I taught economics and business and statistics. I have graduate degrees in economics and statistics, double major, and I find that was matched to my legislative work and has been matched to it. And luckily, the committee leadership assignments I've been given is consistent with my background. I've demonstrated in the last 7 years that I have the drive to spend the necessary time. Others in the House will tell you that I'm a serious representative. I'm not a slacker, and I'm sure you would find that from everyone else.
Thank you very much.
Well, Mike might be an economist, but I'm a communicator. I like talking with people, and I like listening to what people have to say. I'm running because it's time for a change. I've been approached by a number of people and asked to challenge Mike, and I felt that that was the right thing to do. I'm further to the right than Mike. I've noticed a trend towards centralization of government, and we need people in Cheyenne who are going to be functioning on principle. People know my strong conservative principles here in Johnson County, and I think I'm very much aligned with those of Johnson County. Most of you know me because I'm completely embedded in the community. I was one of the 3 mural artists. I'm a mother with kids in the public school. I've also been blessed to have a great education. I was able to go to Yale University as an undergraduate and the American University for my graduate degree. And now I work, I own a small business, and we have 4 real estate-based LLCs that we started from the ground up.
Thank you very much. You were in favor of a bill that effectively stripped the duties of Superintendent of Public Instruction Cindy Hill. Wyoming Supreme Court determined that bill, however, was unconstitutional. You then served on the Select Investigative Committee to look into the grounds to impeach Hill, despite the fact that her term expires at the end of the year and she is not seeking re-election. How do you justify this waste of taxpayers' time and money?
First of all, this wasn't a bill to strip Cindy Hill from her duties. It was a bill to restructure the organizational structure of the Department of Ed. We've had the same kind of problems in that department ever since I can remember. Ever since 1985, we've had these kind of problems with 2 people. You have the Department of Ed, and you all are being run by the Education Board of Education, and also by the superintendent. And it just doesn't work to have 2 bosses. At the time we passed this bill, it had nothing to do with Cindy Hill, and if you look at the results of it, it wasn't a Cindy Hill bill. As far as being on an investigative committee, I fell into that. I certainly didn't volunteer for it, but I was named as a member of the Rules Committee, and that's how I got involved in it. And I certainly didn't ask for the job.
This is a critical bill. It's actually one of the main reasons that I'm stepping up to the plate and throwing my hat in the ring to run, because I see this bill as a pattern in Mike's record of consolidation of power, so that we're taking away the right of the vote of the people to elect a position and putting that power back into the Cheyenne and the governing bodies. That was a very expensive bill. It was incredibly divisive. Matt Mead was almost censured over the whole bill, and Mike didn't just vote for the bill, but he actually was one of the co-sponsors and was one of the leaders in this bill. I think that it's taken us off the topic of education and away from focusing on what's really critical and important is our children and getting the best schools for our kids. This is a critical bill and is reflecting on Mike's record, and I feel that it's important to run on somebody's record. And I see these patterns repeated. He did another consolidation of power.
It was not a consolidation of power bill. It was a tower, it was a bill to return the tower to the State Board of Education. And they were the ones that had the input to the governor as far as appointing someone to do the job that the superintendent does in the department. The simple problem is you can't have a department be responsible constitutionally to evaluate the department, and at the same time they get to run the department. I wish when I was a dean of business school, the business school, I could have that luxury myself. That isn't the way it works.
From 1990 until now, Wyoming has received about $1.37 in federal spending for every dollar that Wyomingites pay in taxes. How do you plan to rid Wyoming of federal regulations without losing federal dollars? And what services would you be willing to forego?
I think that, well, this year our monies that we spent were $8.6 billion. We have quite a lot of money available right now, and I think that if we concentrate on consolidating our funds and not spending more money, that we do not need to be raising taxes. I saw the gas tax that Mike put through, and also with his revenue committee sponsored as an unnecessary thing to be raising taxes right now. I hope that federal funds can be cut back, and we don't need to cut them back. We need to not expand more federal funds, because every time you are taking federal dollars, they are coming with strings attached. And so if there's this question about should we be expanding Medicaid. If we expand Medicaid, we're going to be having to have more input from the federal government in our state. So in any way that we can, I would be very critical of looking at ways to make sure that federal funds aren't coming in needlessly. So, thank you.
Let me restate that question and ask you to answer it directly, if I may.
Thank you, because I thought you were talking about a different bill when you started.
From 1990 until today, Wyoming has received approximately $1.37 in federal money for every dollar paid in taxes. How do you plan to rid Wyoming of federal regulations without losing federal dollars? Or what services are you willing to forego?
So you've asked me basically two questions. What services would I be willing to forego in terms of balancing out federal monies? And how would we rid Wyoming of federal regulation? The reason I'm repeating that is those are not topics that I've been running on as an agenda. Okay, so when we look at, I would take a look at that. How would we rid us of federal regulation? That what I'm very concerned about with federal regulation is the EPA. And I think that what we're doing with the Game and Fish is they're looking very closely at doing appropriate counting and monitoring of our animals so that we have the proper information when the EPA is going to be setting guidelines so that we are fighting back. And I know that the governor is fighting in courts in order to fight regulations from the federal government. And I think that if we keep attacking that, that is the way to fight regulations and over-regulations.
What services?
How is the services that we would cut? I think that we need actually to see, I think one of the ways that we spend a lot of our monies that that perhaps Wyoming doesn't need to be putting as much money into, and hopefully the federal government could help us with, is such as I-80, where we have our roads being used by everybody from the country, and they're paying federal money for, and perhaps they could pay a little bit more for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
The thing that you need to understand with federal money is that, number one, a lot of times we don't take federal money when we have the opportunity to, and it is because of the strings that are attached. But let me tell you some other examples where you almost have to take the federal money, and that's where they have got federal mandates, federal laws, and they say, okay, the states, we want the states to administer this federal law for us and monitor that it's being obeyed by the states. If you refuse them, you can say, okay, we're not going to do it, but they're still going to have their feds out here taking the place of what the state would do. We always find we do better if we do the regulation and have to, bite our tongue and take the money, because we have some influence on how ruthless these are administered.
Well, and I mean, just as a general concept, it's any time that you're taking federal money, it has these strings attached. So we just want to avoid that and look at any way that we can avoid having that. And that's why Common Core is dangerous, because it links our education to federal funds more so than it already is. I think we just always have to be watchful, and that would be my job in the legislature, is to be watchful and mindful of when can we pay for things on our own and can avoid taking any more federal funds.
You were a proponent of increasing the gas tax. It's been now more than a year since that 10-cent per gallon increase took effect. Have you seen the 10-cent increase at the pump, and are you still in favor of it?
Number one, you've never seen the 10 cent being passed on to the consumer. There's never been a shift in the price of fuel of 10 cents. And we've got every model, every statistical model, econometric model that we've ever tried in testing this over the last year, that we are getting a shift of about a nickel, which is exactly what I expected. I have no regrets. It's a responsible way to do it. It was a conservative way to do it. And it's working very well. We find that actually we're selling more fuel as a result of this, because the trucks can now afford to buy their fuel here rather than buy it in bordering states because of the International Fuel Trade Act. And it's actually really worked out well. We have 52 projects on the list now that are going to be done as a result of that 10-cent tax. And a lot of these are roads that are secondary. They're state roads, but they're secondary and not the primary federal roads. And that's where we've always had the problem. So I look forward to talking more about this as we go this evening and expand on it further.
Well, I love it when somebody who's raising my taxes tells me that they're just the messenger. I know that we've taken in some monies with the gas tax, but it hasn't covered all that it was hoping to cover. Some statistics I found were $72 million were raised, but $47 million is going to the highway funds, and the rest goes to the counties and the cities and some snowmobile trails. But we really have trouble with I-80, as I have heard and reiterated and said a minute ago, that I-80 is an area where with all that heavy traffic, with trucks traffic, we need to really look at how we're going to be funding that. And the gas tax has not been something that anybody here wanted. I don't think anybody in Johnson County was wanting that, and the constituents were not asking for that.
First of all, there's been a lot of people in Johnson County that did want it. Every major business sector in Wyoming were on us to get this gas tax passed this year. There wasn't any business sector that says don't pass it, not one. And the reason you find this is because Wyoming's got a tradition of paying their bills. And I've got to tell you a story that's going to be coming up here. I'm going to be going down, as soon as I walk off the stage, we're going to get in the car and go down to Santa Fe, New Mexico via the plane. And I'm going to be giving a presentation to New Mexico because they figured, they realized that we did it right. What they did is they went and borrowed the money. And now they're finding out that the cruel day has arisen when they have to pay it back. And kicking the can down the road is irresponsible. It's not. I've never heard my opponent say anything yet about how she would finance roads, but she just doesn't want road to be taxed.
Thank you. Please talk about one or two projects the Wyoming Business Council has funded in Johnson County in the last decade, and whether or not you are in favor of them, and why.
The Wyoming Business Council is has done a lot of good things for the state. I'm just gonna be honest, and I haven't been following exactly what they've done in Johnson County in the last decade. I mean, I don't know exactly what's been funded by that council. I've been living here and I've seen a lot of the development. But I know as a general principle that the Wyoming Business Council does a lot of really good things. That they, one discussion that we've had though, about one of the fundings that they did in the last year or so was the Magpul decision, where usually they fund businesses to about $1 million to help somebody come into the state, and that one was in excess of that, it was about $12 million more. And so there was some debate about whether that was appropriate, and I think you always have to balance whether state monies are going to a town if they are at risk of putting the local businesses out of business, or at least creating competition that would be challenging the local businesses. And I think we always have to be wary of that, but at the same time, they can, they've done some good things and have really helped to spur some new industries.
Yes, I can tell you a number of projects have been done here. One is, I call it the old U-Ray building, which is on the east side of town, clear to the extreme east. That's where Mountain Meadow Wool is. That was a Wyoming Business Council grant, and I say by any standard that was a success. The Clear Creek School is a new one, a relatively new grant that they're participating in as far as redeveloping a building that's into a repurpose. And the jury's still out on that one. I'm surprised my opponent didn't realize that the Crazy Woman Creek project, or the Crazy Woman Square project, was financed through a downtown grant that is administered by the Wyoming Business Council. And she was a recipient vis-a-vis a contract on many of the dollars that were spent in that project. And they came from, in part, the Wyoming Business Council.
Thank you.
Well, and we didn't actually get our checks from them, so that was why, and we worked with the Vision Buffalo Committee and this, the town over that. But yeah, there's a place where monies can be spent well and can help beautify a town, and I know that there were grants involved with that to pay for that. And URA, I know there's been some questions about that. Because of overlap of who's building the project and where the monies are coming from, but that would be a whole nother discussion. Anyway, I thank you.
There was a footnote in the budget bill this year that prohibited the Department of Education from spending money to review the next generation science standards. Footnote also included language that allows the state to collect, store, and utilize student data. You voted for that bill. Where do you stand on those issues? And is this an effective way of legislating? Why or why not?
It's not an effective way of legislating. I think if there's any part of the legislative process that we have in Wyoming that needs to be cleaned up, it's the budget amendment process. People have gotten wise to it. If they can't get a bill passed through the normal channels, they run it through as a budget amendment and kind of surprise everybody if they take it off their feet. Now, the New Generation Science Standard Bill, or amendment, I should say, was approved on a voice vote. And the reason for that is you don't need a voice vote or anything but a voice vote because it didn't involve spending money. It didn't increase the budget. You know, it's wrong, and it's, you know, I guess when I walked out of there, I didn't feel that the end of the world came, because we're not going to see the end of the world when it comes to scholastic standards. And, you know, I just thought maybe we needed a timeout because there is people that were having second thoughts about Common Core, and I thought we better give that a test first and see how it works. And if it works good, we'll just move and consider science standards someday. And I think, you know, as a result, it probably was the right thing to do. But, you know, the other one on the data, I think I know what I'm talking about here, but I can see I'm out of time, and if I get a chance to come back, I'll...
Thank you.
And the next generation science standards are one of those tricky situations that they themselves were asking our students to specifically study certain things that had to do with global warming and preventing them from studying other things that our science teachers wanted to study. And as you pointed out, collecting data and all sorts of things. And so that the problem with that was the way that it was handled, that it was attached as a footnote to the budget bill, and perhaps that is just not the right way to do things. It also resulted in micromanaging the teachers, and that's been a problem with the legislature micromanaging. It's confusing for the teachers. And I've been a teacher, and I know that you don't need people from above suddenly telling you what to do, and I know that the teachers have been preparing for those standards and also have been changed.
Well, I think we have something that we somewhat agree on. Anyway, I have trepidation about the new generation science standards also, because I think they're treating things that are hypothetical and certainly theoretical this time, and treating them as factual. And of all of the standards you have in a scholastic program that you want to be objective and scientific, the science standards. And that's what, that's why it made it so easy to let that amendment go through, even though it wasn't the right thing to do as far as process is concerned. And that, like I said, I pointed out that I didn't think that was the way to do it, but that's the way it is.
Jenny, there is a difference between electioneering and governing. Governing requires compromise, governance, and fiscal prowess. You've talked about your experience with the Wyoming Republican Party. Talk about how you can parlay that into something beneficial for Johnson County and the state of Wyoming.
Well, what you're referring to with involvement with Johnson County, I've just been involved with the Johnson County Republican Party and the Republican Women of Johnson County, and was sent to the state convention this year and served on the resolutions committee down there, and that was really exciting, and I learned a lot. So you're asking what's the difference between being involved at the party level and then going to the legislature, as I understand.
What's the difference between campaigning and governing?
Well, I think that it's important to have a citizen legislature, that we do not need to have career politicians, and that is a belief that I have, that governance comes from the grassroots level, so that people who are involved in the community and people who do business in the community and are there every day, and who, like I have kids in the schools, so I have a deep connection in school, and be fighting for the school system because I've got skin in the game regarding that. And I know everybody through I'm plugged into the community in many, many different ways, so I'll really be able to bring the voice of Johnson County to the legislature, as opposed to being too embedded in the bureaucracy and taking the voice of Cheyenne back here and telling Johnson County why we need to do it in the way that Cheyenne sees that we need to do it. I think that that is the best way that government is best served, when it grows up from the people here, from the grassroots.
I think the question was really, what is the difference between legislation or legislating and politicking, so to speak? And I'll tell you what it does, what the big difference is for me, and I don't know how it is for everybody else, but the first thing I had to really develop was the art of compromise, in the way of compromising in a way that you get about everything you want, and you make your opponents feel that they got about everything they want, but they really didn't. The other thing that's different about legislating is you've got to look at two sides. Anytime we're talking about an issue that comes to mind dealing with legislating, there's a winner and there's a loser. You talk about Medicaid, there's a winner and there's a loser, all right? And you got to look at both sides, and I hope we get a question on that a little bit later. And this fuel tax business we talked about, it'd be real easy as a
Thank you.
When I was on the resolutions committee, I started reading, and actually as I've been campaigning, I've been reading a lot of bills, and it's almost a new language. It reminded me when I used to work for Harvard Medical School, and I'd have to read the medical journals, and is this newspeak, and everything's sort of a different way of handling things, and I just wanted to say that I find that very interesting and exciting. It's been very stimulating, so that I see the overlap, if you're asking about, between campaigning and legislation, and actually legislating. It's been an exciting time for me campaigning, and I would look forward to the opportunity to be digging into more of these bills and reading them more thoroughly, and that's been a very educational, exciting time.
Wyoming spends almost 3 times the amount per capita of any of the surrounding states on state government. How do you justify this as a self-described conservative member of the majority Republican Party?
Okay, first of all, I question that, 3.5 times. I know it's higher. I know it's, some of the deal is that we chose to do it ourselves that way. We spent, I know, twice as much as our neighboring states on education, but that's something that's a high priority in Wyoming. So when you look at our statistics, that we're spending twice as much. Another problem, I guess, we have is the fact that we have to maintain jails and prisons. We used to farm our prisoners out, and it saved a lot of money, but before I was in the legislature, that was decided we just don't want to do that to people anymore. We're just going to bite the bullet, and if we're going to arrest them and put them in jail, that we're going to incarcerate them ourselves. A lot of this is because of the sparse population. We have real long streets and a great big, actually a medium-sized town by most standards, and it takes more money simply because of logistics. We have cut the budget the last 2 bienniums in a row. We've got fewer workers now than we had in 2008. We've got fewer dollars being spent, and believe me, that's a tough thing to do when you got 3 and 4% inflation that you have no control over. The state government has no more control over rising prices than you and I do in our household. It's something you have to bite the bullet with. Unfortunately, the federal government is causing our prices to go higher than they should, but that's the way it is.
Well, I've been doing a lot of research, and I remember seeing that statistic and thinking about that and being a little shocked. But then I started thinking about it and realized, well, we've got fewer people and these longer roads that have to be maintained, and so we have fewer people, but we still have to maintain a lot of the same infrastructure. But that aside, some of the concerns I have seen, also doing that same research, was our expenditures have gone up from 2009 at $7.7 billion, and then in 2013 they're $8.6 billion. And the other concern that I would have is we've also increased our unfunded liabilities, which are costs that are going to impact us later, and those went up from 2008 from $376 million to, in 13, $1.7 million. So I would be concerned about our budget growing and government growth, and I would like to see government not expanding, but keep those costs low.
My opponent picked a couple of good years for her comparisons. The unfunded liabilities, the listeners have to realize is tied up in our retirement system. It isn't because we've done something stupid, it's because what happened in 2008, and it caused the unfunded liabilities to go up. And they were higher than they were than they are now. In 2008, towards the end, 2009, they were higher than they are now. We're making some good progress, and we've taken some proactive measures that I'm sure that some people wouldn't look at with favor, but it was worth it, and it was something that had to be done in that regard. I would stand by my assertion that the budget has gone down the last 2 bienniums, the 15-16 one and the 13-14 one. And
Thank you. You're a small business owner. As you're well aware, to be an effective legislator requires vastly more than simply 4 weeks in session. How do you plan to manage your time?
Well, before even signing up, I discussed that with my family in great detail, and I have a strong family unit with my husband, and his mother is also in town, so I think that we've got the kids covered, and the legislature is during the school year when they're at school most of the time. So I think that it's actually a pretty exciting thing for the kids. What greater civics lesson can you give your family and your children than to see that anybody can, you tell your kids you can be president if you want. Well, if mom can actually run for something, that's a pretty good civics lesson. So I will foresee having to be far more organized and have some things set up and have perhaps some help cleaning the house. But I think those are problems that I have thought seriously about and do think that that I can balance. As I understand it, throughout the year, it's a lot of work that can be done at home with times to go to meetings periodically once a month, to have to go away from the home and otherwise stay-at-home mom doing some work should be feasible.
I can only speak for myself. I will tell you that time management is one of the biggest challenges you have in legislative work. It's not just going to the meetings, it's reading and reading and reading. I almost sometimes on a weekend hate to go to the mailbox because I know I'm going to get a whole bunch of reading for the weekend. Last year I took a record and found out, I looked at the records, I was gone 22 times into other towns going to meetings. And that doesn't count the legislative session. And those are usually 2 nights, sometimes 3 nights, so I was out of, I guess, living in a suitcase 44 times, 44 nights, and then you have 44 nights during the session. So 88 nights out of the year, I'm gone. And the rest of the time when I'm back here, I'm reading all this material that I get in the mail all the time from UPS and everybody else.
Thank you.
So that is an issue.
Well, it sounds like you boys are trying to scare me out of here, but my slogan is, I'm working for you. So that doesn't really scare me off. I'm offering you a choice. Mike gave you the gas tax and co-sponsored a bill that was later declared unconstitutional, and I just think that that merits a challenge. I won't be coming back from Cheyenne telling Johnson County what Cheyenne says. I'll be trying to take Johnson County's voice to Cheyenne. I care about Wyoming, and I care about Johnson County and all of District 40. And that's why my husband and I chose nearly 20 years ago that this was where we want to raise our family. And as a parent, I think that the most important thing that I can do for my kids and for yours is to ensure limited government. I listen to what people have to say, and I care about what's important to them. You can visit me and have office hours set up right now. I have a website, jennyworkerforhouse.com, Facebook. You can phone me or email. You're going to just see me around town. I'm embedded in this community, and I think that I have the vision and the creativity.
Thank you.
I think the hardest thing about being a politician, if you want to call me that, is to talk about myself and my accomplishments. I don't like to do that. I think it's presumptuous. I don't like to ask people for money, and I don't like to really ask people for their vote. I'm not asking any people for money. I'm going to suggest going here to learn about me, get on the website and find out how I voted on things, not how my opponent says I voted. If I am fortunate enough to get reelected, I pledge the same accessibility, the same openness that I've always pledged and always taken seriously. I'll continue to work harder and do whatever I have the time I need to do it. I want to keep Wyoming on the right track. Right now, we're number 1 in everything that's important to me. Low taxes, liberty, the best run legislature in the state or in the country.